Shpeed is a Boulder Dash and Mr. Do mashup for the ZX Next. It's our Sinclair 71. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Sinclair. I'm John.
And I'm Aaron.
And today, Aaron, we're talking Shpeed.
Shpeed. I feel the need for speed, Bode. I had to
Do
say
you?
it.
Because that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Would you consider yourself a lead foot when it comes to driving?
Boy, I used to be.
Did you?
When I delivered pizza back in the day. It's funny, I was taking Luther Jiu-Jitsu via the back way the other day. And
what's the back way?
the back way is you turn beside Fruth and go down that way.
Oh, okay.
And the road there has these enormous speed bumps on it. In fact, there are speed bumps all the way down that road. Then the road I turn onto after that, there's more speed bumps. And I told the boy, I was like, you see these speed bumps here? He goes, yeah. He goes, I'm like, those are because of me. Because I used to go down, I used to blow down through that road. In fact, I could get air.
That's up by the old Mountaineer 4x4, right?
Yes, sir. And I used to blow, in Hurricane, all these back roads, I was like a modern day Duke boy. I would go down through these things. I mean, gravel flying in my what was it? I used to, was it Grand Am?
Jaguar E-Type?
No, yeah, not quite. And I mean, I would just haul tail to these. Now, did I need to go that fast to deliver these pizzas? Probably not. And something else people don't, just because I want to rant about this a minute. Pizza delivery people today, they don't know how good they got it. They got GPS, they got cell phones, they don't have jack squat. If you couldn't find an address back in the day, you had to drive to the nearest payphone, Payphone! Oh. You know what I'm saying? You had no GPS. You better hope and pray that sucker left their porch light on or has numbers on their house. Otherwise, you're boned. That's why we had to go so fast. We used to give the police free pizza, right? Why did we do that? Because the police would let me go by at 100 miles an hour and just wave, as I drove by. So I had free reign to just go. I could go past all sobriety checks, roadblocks, because they would just flag me by because the boss took care of them. So, yes, I had the need for speed, but I've noticed as I've gotten older and wiser, Boat, that I don't have the need for speed because you could get yourself killed. I don't know if everyone else is a worse driver or I'm more observant than I was. Probably B. But now I'm a lot more worried to go fast than I used to be.
Have you? I mean, when you were growing up, did you lust after fast cars? Like, did you have a picture, like a poster of a Lamborghini on your wall or anything?
I've never cared about cars ever. Mm-hmm. I don't care what I drive. I've driven the worst cars. You've seen some. I've driven the worst car. Now, the car I've got now, the Jeep, is probably one of the best cars I've ever had. It is the best. But, I mean, the Downies, and I've said this before, we drive cars until we're the last owner. We don't sell the car to another guy. They just go directly to the scrapyard. We drive them into the dirt. That's how we do it. It's a family tradition. And so all the cars I've had were like hand-me-downs. I mean, I can say with no doubt in my mind that I've bought cars for $250 and $400 that I drove for years, and was proud of it, but I mean, were they the safest cars? And could they go fast? Even if I had a lead foot, probably not. But that's the way we did it. So, if I wanted to get a special car, I would want like the 1960s Batmobile, something like that. Really something wacky, not just like, I don't know the names of cars, the numbers. I don't know any of that crap, Bode.
Yeah. Well, today's game, even though it's called Shpeed, I don't know if you're going to be setting any land speed records driving this particular vehicle, Aaron. Let's talk about Shpeed, shall we?
This is a unique game. First of all, I want to thank our good buddy Rushi. I'm going to put myself on big time camera here. He sent this copy to us of Shpeed, and I should mention that this is, of course, obviously the physical copy of this, and it's a beautiful job. We have
the artwork is stunning.
It's real good. You can see right here, and then it comes with a little card. I'm guessing these are repurposed switch cases, Bo. That's my guess.
Okay.
And you've got the little SD card, and you've got the little instruction book. So I will say, you've got this thing is a very nice, tight, beautiful piece of work right there. Now, with all that said, the game itself, this is the first game we've ever played on the ZX Next boat. This is our
Correct.
first attempt at going down, and I thought this was a good way to go since Rushi sent us this, that this would be a good first step onto the next, because we both have just recently gotten the ability to play next games fully.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. So via the fine folks in the Mr. development community,
yeah.
They've released a core, and it allows us to dip our toes into the ZX Next
and
world.
I will say, it's the best. As we and you have done this show, I don't know how many years we've done it now, Boat, but we have struggled, especially me, mightily to actually play these games because the emulation of the Next is spotty at best. So we were very fortunate because this is really the first time we've been able to have the ability to play ZX Next games. And for that matter, it's the first time that I've really had a foolproof way of playing games from the Spectrum in general. But certainly, the Unamiga gave me the limited ability to play very small ZX Next games. But with the Mr. Boat, we've got full power.
Yeah. The Mr. ZX Next core is so great. And I second your observation that just playing normal ZX Spectrum games on the Mister is a real treat. So hats off to the development community that's making these cores.
Absolutely. And so, of course, like I said, the first game we'll try out is Shpeed. So let's talk about Shpeed, Boat. This just came out in like December of 2020, very end of the year. So it's as fresh as a daisy, Boat. This was developed by an outfit called ARG Productions, published by Bitmatsoft. You know, it's funny, but Bitmatsoft, actually, we did one of their games on the Amiga recently, or we talked about.
Is that Tiny Little Slug?
No.
Is that one of theirs?
Well, it's one that I think we've got in the pipeline, Smarty and the...
Oh, yes, Smarty and the Nasty Gluttons.
That's right. They also published Golden Wing, Slayers of Hatoro, the Grelock's Contagion. So they've been putting out stuff. Boat has Bitmatsoft, and again, this is strictly available on the ZX Next. Now, I'd never heard of this until we got it sent to us, and so I don't know how big a release it was. But I will say it's interesting because this game is not an original game. It's funny if you actually play the game. One thing I like with this game is it's got historical information baked in. And if you'll indulge me, Boat, I printed out. I've got a little printout here of the history of this game. So, Shpeed was based on the 1980s PC game called Digger, and was first programmed on the Archimedes in 1994 for a school engineering competition by Lee Duke and Dell Robinson. The school won first prize. This ZX Next version of Shpeed is updated with features such as tunnels, switch doors, growing fungus, Teslas, force field, and mines. This is another thing I want to say. The first level, it says, is almost an exact replica of the original Shpeed level, which was based on the BBC micro game Mr. Whiz. Unfortunately, all other info on the original Shpeed has been lost. This is straight from the game. So this game was based on games that were based on several other games. So this game,
it's a full-on Russian nesting doll.
It's a checkered past. Now, this game was developed by Lee Duke, who was mentioned there. As far as I could tell, this was the first game he's ever actually published. Right, so right out of the gate, this is the first time go of it. Now, I'll admit, as I sat here before I'd actually played the game with the box, and looked it over. I looked at the still shots on the back of this, and I tried to envision what this game was. I couldn't tell if it was a Mr. Do clone. I couldn't tell if it was a Dig Dug clone. I couldn't tell what this was until I actually played it. Well, it turns out, much to my delight anyway, it is a clone of nothing. Really, it's sort of a unique puzzle-style game involving digging. You play like basically a bulldozer. I believe this guy's name is something like Diggy McDigface, but if I'm not mistaken.
I am not surprised.
And your job is to Diggy McDigface. I was right. Digger McDigface. I don't want to hose Diggy.
Well, his friends call him Diggy.
Oh, I see. Your job is to go through and collect basically a collectible on each level, diamonds or the like. and you are being accosted by the bad guys. There's a lot of different bad guys in this. There are these 3 multicolored guys. Then you're also going to get various other things that you pick up along the way. It starts out simple enough. You just dig around and pick up these diamonds, and then you move on to the next level. Every level has a cutscene in between it, which is thankfully skippable. Mm-hmm. And the levels start out with what I would consider quite nice music, Boat. When you booted this thing up the first time, what were your first impressions, Boat?
Well, I was expecting this to be a game like Mr. Do.
Right.
Because when you look at this screen, that's what you think of. You got fruit, you've got falling projectiles, falling rocks or whatever, and you've got bad guys that are roaming about, okay? And you're making a path through, some sort of material, some sort of dirt or whatever. However, like you said, this game is not really a ripoff of anything. It's an amalgamation of lots of different types of games. I would say that the game that this reminds me most of is Boulder Dash, because there are ways that you can get stuck in levels that just don't happen in games like Dig Dug or Mr. Do, because the rocks that fall stay where they fall. You can't push them out of the way. You're remarkably ineffective as an operator of heavy equipment in this game.
It's actually quite infuriating that you can't push these. I mean, at first I was like, what? But that's
right. And so
you can't smash your opponents.
If you're looking for a straight up action game like Mr. Do or Dig Dug, where you're constantly on the move, doing stuff, running around, that's not what this game is. This game is a lot more. You've got to think about what you do before you act. The enemies, much like in Mr. Do, they only travel in areas that you've undug. Now, in later levels, they sort of gain the ability to kind of pass through places that you haven't dug, and I think they might be set on a timer in a way. One of the problems that I have with this game is the inconsistency of the enemy movement, because the enemies just sort of they're not really after you as much as they're just sort of mindless zombies that roam about for the most part, but they still get in your way a lot. But it would be really great if they would be consistent, like either don't let them go in places you haven't dug yet, or make them change whenever they morph into like, for example, in Dig Dug, the enemies change into ghosts and they're able to float in places that you haven't tunneled. In Mr. Do, they actually change form completely, and they turn into these, like, these different sorts of monsters and things like that. In this game, you don't get the memo that they can do that, and that can screw you in a lot of ways. But anyway, you move throughout these levels, and your goal, as you said, is to get all of the collectibles in each level. Okay. Now, what makes this game different than those other games like Dig Dug or whatever is there are teleportation gates in this game, and they're all. The big thing with this game is there's a million different things, but there's really only like 3 object types. So you've got the collectible, you've got the thing that drops that can trap you, and you've got teleportation gates. That's it. That's the game. Now, there's a lot of different skins on these things, but at the end of the day, that's what you've got. Now, is this game... Well, I don't want to go into, what I think in totalitarianism of this game in total, but I think that I get the feeling that this game is sort of a jack of all trades, master of none type experience. And the biggest problem that I have with it is that it tries to shoehorn all of these different concepts into one game, but on top of it, the first thing that you need in a game like this, in a game where timing is everything, is you need to have really tight, responsive controls. And, true to its actual real life form, I mean, you're maneuvering this big, bulldozer around. It doesn't exactly turn on a dime. And the way that you move, it doesn't allow for a lot of rapid movement. If you're a Mr. Do guy, you learn to whip that joystick in every which way, and he immediately responds. In this game, everything moves just a little bit too slowly, and it's really annoying because the monsters sure don't move slowly. They move quick as a flash. So, Aaron, what are your impressions? Did you like this one?
Well, I will say I got to level 10. Okay, so you may have gotten further than I did. I got to level 10 when I on the times I got to play that this week. And the game, it's a funny game because it has a lot in common with the aforementioned games Dig Dug and Mr. Do. The one thing it doesn't give you is the ability to really hurt your enemies that much.
You have no offensive weapon. Yeah, I meant to mention that too. Yeah, very good point.
I mean, what you've got is the ability to drop the boulders or fruit or whatever. That's it. That's all you've got, and you can't push that stuff. So you have to play very defensively. And on top of that, you get into there's a lot of very close quarters because a lot of these levels, these aren't like Mr. Do or Dig Dug levels where you've got this huge expanse of dirt. These levels are often part of a maze or a walled-in section where you're going to be in very close quarters with one of the three monsters that are roaming around to get you. By the way, their names are Harry, Barry, and Larry, according to the documentation. And the monsters are actually that's one of the places where the game is odd. You're going to be, the monsters, like you said, they can only pass through areas you've dug, except if there's one little thin line between two tunnels, which is basically the graphical area there. They can go right through that, all right? They can go, now, can they, there may be a portion of the game, and you may have gotten further than me, later
I've definitely seen them pass through areas that were bigger than that.
I've never seen them. Sure. I mean, on the first 10 levels, I didn't see it, but I didn't guess as far as I got. But they could absolutely pass between two tunnels and the little graphical line that stands between.
Like well, what it might be is once all of these are basically tiles. They're square tiles.
Yeah.
And it could be that because I've uncovered half of a tile.
Yeah.
But maybe once you sort of break that tile shape in any capacity, maybe they can pass through. Maybe that's.
But I know for certain they can go through just the dirt between two lanes.
Right.
And so why does that matter? Well, often that's going to be what separates you from the bad guy. And so effectively at those junctures, you're going to be hoping that he just doesn't come across and get you. He might not. And so what you get into when you get into that area, it's like an element of luck as opposed to skill.
What's aggravating about that is, like I said, that the monsters aren't particularly concerned about coming after you. That they're just as likely to pass you by when you're going up and they're going down as they are to come get you. And like you said, it all comes down to luck. It's like, well, I wonder if they're going to come and get me this time. Versus if they're always going to come after you, then you can adjust your play accordingly.
I found that as I played this, that the monsters, there was not entire predictability, but there was a little bit. And for example, when you open a new area that the monster hasn't been, he will almost certainly go into that area.
Right. That's the way he's programmed.
Okay?
Absolutely.
So, which makes him someone who's on your tail a lot, depending on how, because a lot of these areas, one of the things this game does that I find interesting is there are gates that you have to unlock. And so many of the different areas are comprised of little enclosed areas that make up the whole screen. So, for example, if you've got a full screen here, split it in quarters, and each quarter is a different area that is cut off from the others, except for a gate, or that maybe you may have to unlock, for example, that the monsters can't pass to. And so, what that means is you're in such close quarters with the enemy that that's where that element of luck becomes a much bigger deal. Okay, so I'd say that part kind of turned me off a little bit because it's just it seems like you're just hoping they don't get you. Now, if there may be a method to it, and I did get to level 10, so I got past some stuff, but sometimes I just thought that I got lucky. I'm often you'll complete a level by the skin of your teeth. You're barely going to get out because you're getting
which is a good feeling. I mean, that's a good thing in any game.
Yeah.
But like I said, I just found that the inconsistency in the enemy pathfinding was really off-putting.
Well, like I said, they're odd. They behave. They are. I found them to be semi-aggressive. But again, that could just be because they come after you when you open a path. Who knows? All that said, I was ready to poo-poo this bad boy right out of the gate because now I don't know much about what the Spectrum Next can do that the original Specky can't. Okay, I know there are some things, but this game it didn't blow me away in terms of like its graphical abilities.
So we should. Let's talk about that a little bit. So, what you've got here is a game that does not really look like it should. The title screen looks great.
Yeah,
the title screen looks great. The in-game graphics. I mean, when you think about the ZX freaking Next, the machine that launched 1,000 ships, that everybody and their brother thought tooth and nail for years to get on the exclusive pre-order list on the Kickstarter, this is not the type of graphics that I am thinking about. You know, what you have here is a game that looks slightly better than a C64 game. In terms of its presentation, the main animated bulldozer, that looks fine. You know, it looks fine. The monsters look terrible. I mean, they just look terrible. They look like something out of a 48K ZX Spectrum game, just with 2 colors instead of 1. They flail about like wacky waving inflatable arm flailing tube man. It's just it's not a good looking game. The boulders and everything, there's no animation in the background. There's not, you know, the diamonds don't shine at you as you're waiting to collect them. There are no graphical touches. The fungus, as it grows, it doesn't animate as it grows. It just appears. When you destroy an enemy, it doesn't crush. It doesn't get crushed like it does in Mr. Do. It just disappears like a freaking 48K Spectrum game. I can't tell you sort of how disappointed I am in terms of the graphical fidelity in a game like this that's touted to be a ZX Next release.
Well, I wasn't nearly that disappointed, and I'll tell you why. This is the first time I've played a ZX Next game for any length. I had a cup of coffee with some before the Amiga choked on them. And so one would ask, what should a ZX Next game look like? Should it look like an Amiga game? What should it look like? I mean, in my mind, a ZX Next game should look a little bit like, say, a ZX 128 game with better colors and no color clash. And that's sort of what this looks like, right? It should sound, at the bare minimum, as well as a ZX 128 game. And this sounds at least that good. The sound quality in this is outstanding. You would never find this on the original ZX, just the 128. So, by definition, I mean, again, I don't know what people expect from their ZX Next, and I wasn't heavily invested in it.
Well,
so I don't know what to look for.
But it's colorful. Make a fair point.
It's a colorful game. Now, what I would have liked to have seen, I mean, they're like the off-screen bulldozers are animated. There's some little touches. Here's what I would like to have seen. This is far beyond the what we're talking about here in terms of whether it's a good ZX Next game or not. I think they could have used the full screen. And that's one thing, we see it. We play a lot of these old games, but where they cut the screen by a third, and they're doing that because they're using limited hardware. With the ZX Next, you should have the horsepower to show me a full screen game without having a third of it cut off. And this game could have used that extra third of the screen desperately.
Well,
and so that's what I would like to have seen. I would like to have seen the whole screen used to give you a little more play field area. I think that would have been, so I can see a deficiency there. But in terms of how do I judge this on its graphical quality, I mean, this is sort of what I kind of expected, because we're playing in the realm of speculation. What would the next one have looked like, as opposed to because this could probably have done a lot better. But they could have went out and just put ZX Next and strapped on the front of a PC. But that's different. You know what I'm saying? There's a lane here.
To me, I understand exactly what you're saying, and at this point, we don't know what a ZX Next game looks like. I mean, I've looked at several games, and they all, there's not really a unifying look. Like when you play a ZX Spectrum game, a 48K or 128K ZX Spectrum game, you immediately know what it is because of the limitations, but also because of sort of the art, the way that it kind of turned into an art form.
Right.
And I, whenever you do a machine like the Next, I don't know. It just seems like if they wanted to make it look retro, they should have leaned a little bit more heavily in that direction. Because otherwise, if you don't go out of your way to sort of make it look retro, then it looks just sort of like bad. And again, I come back to the enemies. I just can't get over just how sort of uninspired the enemies look. Everything else is pretty forgivable about the graphics. And I totally disagree with you about the playfield. I think the playfield is a perfect size. This is an arcade style game. You want to have your high score, the lives, and the level, plus the room name, that very British touch on the side of the screen. I don't have a problem with that. It's not as if the levels would have gotten any bigger if you had more of the screen to play with. But I just would have liked to have seen better enemies, better animation especially, and maybe even just like, I don't know what I want. That's part of the problem.
The reason I talk about the screen size is this, and I touched on it earlier. I don't like the fact that you're relying on luck to get past some of this stuff. All right,
but how would the screen size improve that?
Because you could have a little more. You could do one of two things. Okay, one involves a bigger screen, and one doesn't. One, you could make it where the three bad guys just can't pass through that thin layer of dirt. Okay. Or you could give me a little bit more dirt to work with, right? And which is why that's having the screen being large, you'd have a little more room to work because these are enclosed areas. I just think, I mean, this game, I like this game, by the way. I'm not going to poo-poo it. I think it's fun. It surprised me because the puzzles in it are very clever. It's a hard to put down game for me. I like the idea of unlocking the gates. I like all the aspects of it except for the luck element that I don't like, and that can be off-putting to me because it's always there, every level, and that's why it's always in my face that I'm right beside this guy, and at any point he can just come and kill me. And this isn't a thing where like I'm not good enough or whatever. That's just the way it is. I mean, because there is no way to get around it.
Do you think another alternative would be to add an offensive weapon, aka the ball and Mr. Do?
It would be nice to at least be able to I can see why you can't, okay? And the reason they did that is because the puzzle aspects of the game require those guys to be sort of almost omnipresent. I mean, you could smush one, but they come back, and so and also it pushes the action along, okay? So I can see because you got to think when you've got these enclosed areas, if you're killing everyone off, then you can just linger around for a while. There's no one after.
Well, yeah, but
so
I mean, if you did it like the ball, the ball you can only use one time, and there's a big cooldown. The enemies also respawn. Actually, I guess they don't respawn in Mr. Do they?
No,
but
that's my point. And so in this game, that was part of the overall game. And not having a more weaponized bulldozer. So right. I don't know. Would it have helped? It would have felt more like a game I've played before, and this one doesn't. This one seems harder to me, but fun. So, and again, I wish this thing's got like 50 levels.
I think it has 100 levels.
Does it have 100? I know it's got at least 47, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But it's funny because I couldn't find the amount of levels written down anywhere. But I think there's fun to be had, and I think like I said, graphically, I thought it was okay. I thought they got the point across. Just there's really that I've got that one gripe, and I don't know if weaponizing stuff or not would make a difference. I do want to point something out though. I was looking up Lee Duke on his Facebook, and sure enough, I think it was it's about 3 or 4 months ago. He put a message out, and the message read, "It would seem that despite my best efforts in playtesting Shpeed, I have unintentionally left a bug in level 47, rendering it unsolvable, for which I'm very sorry about. I've created a patch file for this, and a screen position error for when the game final and sequence is interrupted." Which I think he meant final end sequence. "If you have purchased a copy, please contact blah, blah, blah. Future purchases will contain the patch file." So most people probably will end up getting, well, I don't know, it depends on how these sell. If people pre-ordered a lot of them, a lot of people probably have the bugged version. Now, I've not gotten to level 47, obviously, and I'm guessing you didn't get there either. But it's something to keep in mind, and if you did purchase this game, you can pop one over, and Lee is offering good thing about living in a modern age, and of course, everyone's got a ZX, they're probably like online or on the network in some capacity. So really patching it shouldn't be a big deal.
Right.
But again, this is the realm.
It's interesting the way that these, this is the first time that we've seen these games before. This is the first time we've done a ZX Next game.
Yeah.
And I actually created the VHD file for us to play this game.
Yes, because I couldn't get mine to work with what I had. I'm glad you did that.
Yeah, and so the way that it works is that the way that Shpeed works and the way that I assume that all of these games work is not the little memory card. Not only does it contain the game, it also contains all of the files necessary, all of the BIOS for the ZX Next itself, because the system itself runs off an SD card, much like the Mister and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
So you're actually getting on every little SD card, you're getting all the files necessary for the ZX Spectrum or the ZX Next run, in addition to the game file itself.
It is, just this is a sidebar here, but I want to talk about it just because we've kind of brought it up. Who knows when we're going to come down this road again with the ZX Next. Before you had seen this game and played any ZX Next stuff, in your mind, what would constitute the system that you would think would be appropriate to be called the ZX Next? Like, when I say that is, think about all the systems that have came out after the ZX, okay? Think about them all in your head. There's a cutoff somewhere, and that would be too modern, right? Is there a system that would be comparable to what you think the ZX Next should be? I mean, should it be like the same as a NES? Should it be?
Yeah. It would be the same as something like how people make pixel art games that look like, for example, a great example of this is Mega Man 9. Remember when Mega Man 9 came out and it looked like an NES game? Now, there were things going on behind the scenes that would not make it run on an NES, but it looked like an NES. That's sort of the way that I picture like the ZX Spectrum, is that if I was going to make a ZX Next, the games would still look like ZX Spectrum games. It would have the same palette and everything, but it wouldn't have the slowdown. It definitely wouldn't have the tape loading time. It would have better sound. I'm sorry, I cannot get nostalgic for the 48K beeper. It would have better sound. It would essentially be sort of like a 128, but have even more, like you could have multicolor sprites without color clash, but you'd keep that same palette. You'd keep sort of the same feeling. Like, to me, and again, this is so totally subjective.
Yeah.
But like, this doesn't feel like a ZX Spectrum game. This feels like somebody made like an indie game that looks like an old game that's a cross between a couple different classic computer and arcade games.
See, to me, it does look like. I mean, look at the. You talk about the bad guys looking like kind of janky. They look like 8-bit bad guys. They look straight. I mean, so I think that that part of it they got right. I mean, the bad guys they look like the kind of guys you would expect to find in an 8-bit game. And depending on how far, we know the weird history of Shpeed, sort of, right? I don't know if these guys were in the other versions or if they looked like this. We have no idea. So we don't know how much of this was an homage to the previous versions as well.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And again, it's hard. I imagine that we might be getting some blowback on this episode because people that are real into the ZX Spectrum or the ZX Next, they want to like everything that's released for it. Because, I mean, how else are they going to justify the expense of getting the machine and all of the hype and all of the waiting and everything like that? Now, I'm not saying all ZX Next fans are like that, but there's definitely a contingent. I've been in the Facebook groups. I know what goes on. So the question is playing this game going to make you, appreciate the ZX Next for what it is? Or does this not scratch that itch? Does it not make you feel like you're back in 1985? It's like the way that I think you should approach the Next is like, it's like the Spectrum like you remember it, through those rose-tinted glasses where you don't remember the bad things, but you only remember the good things. And you didn't have anything to compare it to because it was your first computer. So taking those same feelings and taking those same sorts of ideas and tropes and just taking out all of the bad stuff, but leaving in the things that made the Specky, to me, that's what I hoped the ZX Next would do. Have I seen any next games that do that so far? No. Have I seen all the next games? No. So there's tons to explore. There's tons to discover out there. I'm going to keep playing them as they get released. But so far, what I pictured the next to be in terms of its software has not yet come to fruition.
Yeah, I'll just say I mean blowback. I don't think we're killing the next. I mean,
No,
this is the next was something that I loosely followed when it came out, and then of course we got into the Spectrum more and more of the years. It would be interesting if they gathered a committee together and then they decided on sort of educated, arbitrary way that the ZX Next would work. What would be the upper limits of the graphics? What would be the upper limits of the memory? How fast would it run? How many colors would it support? Because one of the unique aspects and elements of the Next project is, this thing never existed. And so you basically are pulling it from the ether, Bo. You're just kind of pulling it down like that. And so, and I'm not and there may be documentation somewhere that tells me everything I want to know, but I've never seen it. But in terms of what I expect from the Next, this is sort of what I expected. I'm not expecting Amiga quality graphics or audio, but I'm expecting better graphics. I'm expecting more colors. This game was a very colorful game. It had good music. It had multiple tracks. I think it had 5 or 6 tracks in it that were well done. And I think with a few small things I didn't like, overall I had fun. Is it one I'll go back to? Probably. To be honest with you, I like light puzzle elements. You know what I'm saying? And the digging part appeals to me, so it's something I can get into. And I will say one thing I did notice about this. I looked on the website. You can buy this digitally, £8, and the physical copy of this thing, the physical copy, which we both said was of quality, is only £18. Not bad. We've seen stuff go a lot more than that. So I think it's reasonable. I think if you're the kind of person that likes to get stuff just to have it, if you collect the boxes and stuff, you can do a lot worse than that because it's pretty. And also, oh, by the way, there's a good game in there too, a pretty good game. For a fellow that's sort of just dipping his toe in the pool of game releases, I think that he might have something to go on, man. Lee Duke, I think you should keep the ball rolling, and I hope. And from what I read, this game was well received, and apparently the pre-orders were real good. It sold well, so hopefully this is the first move in a career on the Next where Lee releases a lot of neat stuff, and I'm looking forward to seeing some other neat stuff. And I'm sure we're going to get back to the Next sometime in the near future. But I enjoy this sort of treading into the new world a little bit, Boat.
Yeah, absolutely. And even though, like I said, I have some issues with the gameplay itself, the concept is sound. Like you said, light puzzle elements with an action sort of mechanic. You can't go wrong with stuff like that. That's evergreen in terms of a great theme. And the your little bulldozer guy, who doesn't like a bulldozer?
Digger McDigface, Boat.
Right.
I doubt that was his original name. That's just a guess.
All right, Aaron. So we're going to close things up here. Just reminding everybody that if you like our Sinclair and you'd like to see it turn into a weekly show, you can head on over to patreon.com/our Sinclair to help us reach our goal. We do want to thank all of our Patreon supporters: Edvin, Helland, Andrew Waite, Eric Nelson, Kapin, Krispy, Laurent, Giroud, Mark Downie, O'Brien's Retro and Vintage, Hermski, Paul, Bossman Harrington, Peter Mulhullond, Chris Foulds, Garry Heather, Jed Byrne, Mark Derham, Mitsoyama, Pixels at Dawn, and Seth Yates. All right, Aaron, next time on our Sinclair, we're going back to the original, back to the 48K, Aaron.
Way back.
We're going to take a look at an adventure game that I think you're really going to get into. This is a game inspired by Aleister Crowley himself, Aaron. Yes. We're going to be playing Heavy on the Magic.
Oh, okay. That sounds interesting.
Yeah. So it should be a good one. All right, guys. Thank you as always, and we will see you next time. Until then, rewind tape
and press play.